Welcome to the Everything Building Envelope podcast. On this show, we discuss topics relating to the exterior building envelope, such as waterproofing, glazing, cladding, roofing, and more. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. For previous episodes, show notes, and bonus video content, check out our website, everythingbuildingenvelope.com.
Welcome, everyone, to our Everything Building Envelope podcast. I'm Chris Matthews, President and Principal for GCI Consultants, and I'm your host today. I'm really excited today to have as our guest Henry Lopez, who is the Managing Partner of Levante Business Group. And we work a lot with Henry. He assists us in our business as a third-party consultant in lots of different areas, and we've worked with him for several years with coaching and other input from Henry on the day-to-day operation of GCI. So I'm interested to talk to Henry today. Welcome, Henry. And you want to tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you and GCI came together?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on this show. I'm a listener of the podcast. But I actually came to know GCI through your partner and one of the founders of GCI, which is Paul Beers. Paul was actually the second guest I ever had on my podcast, about 3 or 4 years ago now. So as to what I do, I'm a serial business owner. I'm also a business coach and a consultant, which is, as you said, how I've been working with GCI as a third-party consultant on various projects over the years. So I've owned about 11 or 12 different businesses. I've bought, sold, built, had successes, had some failures in the business world. I started my career, though, back in the 80s as a computer programmer, went into software sales and marketing for most of the 90s, and then was able to segue into full-time business ownership in the early 2000s.
And I know you call yourself a serial entrepreneur, and I think that's one of the things that really attracts us and makes our working relationship well, because many of us at GCI, we kind of look at ourselves as good or bad, rugged individualists, and kind of having that entrepreneurial spirit. So I think we kind of mesh really well. As you said, owning all the businesses you have, that's a big part of your makeup, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the reasons I enjoy working with GCI is you guys are very entrepreneurial, very lean organization, very productive, very entrepreneurial. That's what I like working with. Those are the types of organizations I like working with. And so, yeah, it definitely is a match in the way that you guys think about things, the way that you're always looking for new opportunities, never afraid to try something new, never even afraid to pivot different product lines or service offerings. And so that is definitely a fit between the way I've gone about business and the way that you guys operate.
And that kind of leads into a good discussion topic of just the culture fit between you and us, some of your experience with culture in other organizations you've worked with. What do you see in GCI and some of the companies you've worked with in your business as well, as far as culture and the challenges and successes there?
Yeah, it's a good question. And of course, this is a topic that people talk about a lot. I think it gets a lot of lip service, culture, and it sounds good. And I think what you guys have done very well is at the top, at the leadership level, you and Paul and Alfonso, I believe it starts at the top. I think you guys really believe in what you put forth as a culture. It's not just a plaque on the wall. I call it lipstick on a pig, or when you go into that not so good fast food restaurant and they have the employee of the month plaque on the wall, you see through that. It's transparent. It's somebody at corporate who decided, hey, we'll do this, and that'll be culture. Culture is what you guys believe in truly, in how you treat people and how you treat each other and how you treat your clients. It's who you are because it's an extension. The work that you guys do represents you. It represents Paul. It represents Alfonso and the other team members. And so I think that's where it starts. Your challenge, of course, is you are a very distributed organization. You're very virtual. You're not all in one office. And so what I have found in a lot of organizations, it's hard to build a culture when you're not all together. Because you, if for no other reason than you can't have those pep rallies, right? You can't gather the forces
Right.
together and give them that big speech for the week. But you guys are doing it because the culture, you guys set it at the top. It's been consistent for all of these years that you guys have been in business. What is it, 30 years almost now? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. And then what happens is it gets applied to what you look for in part in the people that you bring on to the team. So that's what I think you guys have done very well. And I think that you guys don't even necessarily do it all that consciously. It's who you are. And that's why I think you have such a productive culture at GCI.
Well, and we've probably not done as good a job at some points in the past, mostly because, as you said, we're a distributed company. We're doing everything virtually, as most companies now are quite familiar with the virus situation, but we've been doing it like that for over 10 years. So,
right.
There's definitely a learning curve there, and some of the business practices that we have learned about and implemented in GCI have helped us a lot there. Regular communication, actually identifying and promulgating our core values, reinforcing those to all of our team on a regular basis, those kinds of things. As you said, some of it's just intrinsic that you do, hopefully, by the way you present yourself to your clients and your team. But some of the processes we have now have kind of more formalized that for us. And, I think a big thing that we've learned is, as you said, you might not have that weekly face-to-face pep rally, but you need to have a meeting cadence. You need to have a regular commitment to some gatherings, even though they're remotely, even though they're Zoom or Teams or something like that, to keep the team engaged.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll get into more of that here as we talk about systems, because systems is interrelated to culture. And you're exactly right. But most small organizations, Chris, in my experience, their challenge, especially again, as we've added this component of being distributed, and as you said, we all have been because of COVID. But, if you're a small engineering firm or a small general contractor, which most of these firms are, when I say small, you're not big corporations that have an HR department or somebody that can own culture, right? Or a small law firm that might be listening. It really then, what will happen is, despite the fact that you may not have, or you've just started over the last few years to kind of make it a process, that's why it's so important that it starts at the top and that it's really who you guys are, because it would quickly fall apart otherwise. The best program or process or the best, articulation of it throughout the organization falls apart because in a small organization, people see through that very quickly. They see through that very quickly as to how you behave or Paul behaves or Alfonso behaves. Because in a larger organization, the people at the top can kind of hide behind layers of people. But in a small organization like yours or a small engineering firm, people see you. They interact with you. They might be on a job site with you. So your values and that culture gets represented to them on a daily basis, regardless of what the poster of the flying eagle on the wall may or may not say.
Exactly, right. So you were mentioning some too, as far as technology and how that folds into the whole culture and I guess regularly reinforcing that to people. So what do you see in that regard?
Yeah, I think it's the systems and the technology. Let's start with the systems first. You guys are ahead of the curve for an organization of your size with implementing systems. And we're talking about all types of systems, most importantly, EOS, right? The Entrepreneurial Operating System. So you all took on that challenge of implementing that system so that you do have this process that becomes more repeatable, but also that allows your rugged individualists to be more productive individually and as a team. And that's the thing that's hard, because you all are a classic example where you as leaders are also delivering, working with clients, interacting with clients, working on projects. And often what I see happen at similar organizations is you don't find the time to implement systems. And so it's this ongoing chaos that results. What you all have done very well is understood the value and the importance of implementing systems. And just to define systems can be something as encompassing as EOS, which is, again, based on traction from Gino Wickman, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is very comprehensive. Or it could be something as simple as a checklist that people, I think, in small organizations get hung up on. What is a system? A system is anything that gives us structure, in particular in those areas where something gets performed the same way on somewhat of a repeated basis. But it's also, as you spoke to, Chris, it's how we're going to communicate. That's a system as well. How are we going to come together on a periodic basis, on a regular cadence to communicate and collaborate? That's a system also. Implementing a CRM tool is a technology that supports a system. This is how we're going to interact with prospective new clients. This is how we're going to walk them through the process of becoming a client. This is how we're going to deliver our service to them. All of those things, GCI, I think, is ahead of the curve compared to other similar sized organizations in implementing those systems, with the end result being that the individuals are more productive, the team collaborates better, and the end result for the client is higher quality. That's what I've observed.
Yeah, higher quality work, better coordination among our team members. A lot of our projects in the litigation end of things that we work on, there's more than one of our team members involved. And one of the benefits of the systems, as you described, some of them can be pretty detailed and some of them can be more of an outline or checklist. But we've worked hard to have a lot better consistency, regardless of who our technical team members are, and in an assignment for a client, that everybody's educated about the right way to go about it. Whatever the technical task we're doing is done in a repeatable way. Our reports, we worked on making them more user-friendly, more informative, better looking visually, all those things, and then making all that consistent. And all those, as you said, are different examples of systems that ultimately, hopefully, make us do a better job for our clients.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, I think that's why GCI is the leader in that respect. When you compare the work product that GCI delivers, I think that's one of the reasons it's superior. Certainly, it's to a big extent that you have extreme talent at GCI, right? Very talented people doing the work, but the system allows them to produce that work on a consistent basis at that high level of quality. And that's a key component, Chris, is the consistency. Systems allow us to deliver on a consistent basis so that every one of GCI's clients receives the same level of service, the same level of quality, whether it's a report or an inspection or appearing as an expert witness, whatever it is. Those underlying systems ensure that you show up with the best that GCI has to offer for every client.
And that goes into the technology end of it as well.
Yeah.
And how everything from collecting data to presenting that report and everything in between.
Yeah, and so what I have seen is that, Paul in particular, and you as well, you guys are not afraid to try technology. And it doesn't always work out, right? Sometimes it fails. And that's okay, because if you're not failing sometimes, that means you're not trying hard enough. So you guys are never afraid. I have never heard from the leadership at GCI, oh, that's just the way we've always done it. That's never something I have heard at GCI. Instead, it's always, how could we do it better? How could we do it more effectively? How could we deliver more for the client? Can we apply this tool or that tool? And sometimes it ends up with a bunch of different tools, which is a challenge. But
Sure.
What it shows is that you're not afraid to apply technology to facilitate productivity and to improve the quality of what you're delivering to the client.
Yeah, and I think we have actually been ahead of the curve in a lot of areas. Just an example that I think of is, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, everybody was talking about, kind of a paperless office type thing, paperless.
Right.
Everything was going to go digital. And again, we were ahead on that. And our biggest challenge was that, we could do a lot of that digitally internally, but externally, everybody was still in a paper mode. And it's not been that long ago that in a big litigation case, we would get boxes and boxes full of full of documents. And
I could imagine.
and back in the day, we would then store those in file cabinet. And as experts, when we're involved in a case, we're just thumbing through all that paperwork. And then when we got to the point where internally we saw all the efficiency and advantages to digitizing all that, we would get all those documents in, and then we'd send them off to all be scanned into a system. And then the next thing was we would encourage our clients, don't send us the paper products, send them to us where you've already scanned them in. And so then it would be, we'd get CDs and thumb drives. And now we've gotten to the point where most everyone now is comfortable with the digitized format, and it's just sharing links. And even in our system and in our emails now, we have a link where our clients can click right on that in our signature and upload directly to our system all the documents that they need to send. So, it's just one little example, but as you said, we're not afraid to try new things, and some don't work. Some you revise and go another direction, but all of them, I think, eventually lead to a big improvement in efficiency, quality, everything else that we were talking about before.
Yeah. And I think it comes also, this point comes back to culture. And from this perspective, Chris, as a small organization, it's not like you have a large IT department. In fact, that's virtual for you as well, where you've got people coming up with or testing these technologies, or what about this? Why don't we do a test project on this? That you just don't have those resources, right? You're a very lean organization. So what you've created culture-wise is that you empower and encourage and almost require people at all levels to come up with ideas, right? Whether it's somebody like Eric, who's out in the field constantly leading teams of people doing inspections, coming up with how do we use a tablet better to how do we photograph more effectively. You guys, you and Paul and Alfonso are very open to those ideas coming from all levels of the organization. What I have found can happen, especially in smaller organizations, is you've got these people at the top whose egos would be bruised if the idea wasn't theirs. And that's, I think, also a subtle but very important part of culture, is that the way GCI works is if somebody comes up with an idea, it doesn't matter whose idea it is. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea.
Yep, and that EOS operating system that you talked about encourages that, in that you've got, they don't call it an organizational chart. You've got this accountability chart. You've got regular communication going on at the different levels of accountability. Everyone understands what they're accountable for, and those ideas then can move right up to wherever they need to get implemented. And then, as you know, we're big believers, followers of the whole extreme ownership Navy SEALs concepts, and they're 100%. That's their whole structure, is the decentralized command. You have the commander's intent, but then have the individuals in their different areas empowered to make decisions, get things done, and then when a mission is complete, debrief about that and get that information shared throughout the organization. So we're always learning, we're always improving. Every time we do something, hopefully we come back with a better way that can be shared throughout, and again, do a better job for our clients the next time.
Yeah, and then in my observation, that's one of the reasons you've been around in the position of leadership for 30 years, is you've been able to evolve, pivot when you need to, and continuously improve. You've had to do that, and you've done that, and I think that's why you've been in the position of leadership that you have for so long.
What do you think about other tools and resources for the team, maybe still involving technology or in some other areas that you see with GCI or some of your other clients that you work with?
Well, I mean, most recently, the CRM implementation, I think, is a good example of another application of a tool. And I think one of the key to happen in an organization to be positioned to adopt new technology is you have to have a culture that doesn't say, well, that's different, that makes it more difficult. Let's just talk about CRM for a second. The classic pushback I always hear from organizations that implement a CRM is that everybody says, no, now it takes me longer to do my job, or it slows me down. It's a typical classic excuse. And so the culture has to be strong enough to say, well, we're going to try this to make us more efficient, even though there is a learning curve, right? So that approach to implementing technology, I think, is what you have to see. Whether if we look at it from an inspector in the field, trying different technologies, even though initially it might slow them down, I think has been part of how you guys have done a good job of implementing tools and new tools. Am I answering the question you were asking?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We've talked a lot about people, and one of the areas that you've helped us in, and you're continuing to work with us in is recruiting and identifying new people. We continue to grow, and we need more team members. So in helping us look for the right fit, the people that hopefully will fit our culture, be productive members of our team. And we've always found that to be a big challenge, in that we're in kind of a niche industry, even within the engineering or architecture field. We specialize in the building envelope. So it's not even a general engineering firm. So that's always been a challenge, is to finding the right people to add to the team. And now that you've been working with us in that regard, I wondered if you had any insights on that we might share.
Yeah. As you were saying that, the top word that comes to my mind is resourcefulness. But I think that to be successful in an environment like GCI and other, a small engineering firm, like I said, a small contractor or subcontractor, a typical law firm, I think the resourcefulness is key. In other words, in small environments like this, entrepreneurial environments, you're not going to have a lot of support staff. You're not going to have, I can't pop down 3 cubicles and ask a question. The support is there, but you have to be resourceful to do well in this environment. You have to be the kind of person that's going to try to figure it out first with the resources that you do have, and then raise your hand when you get stuck. It's funny because I was just putting together a list. I had put together a list when my daughter graduated from high school, from college rather, getting ready to start her first job. I sat her and her boyfriend down and said, here's my list of things that you need to know. And one of was this concept of resourcefulness. In other words, to be able to go and try to figure things out before you say, well, I don't know, right? I don't know where to find that. I think that's one of the key things that I've been looking for in people that are going to be a good fit at GCI is, do they have that resourcefulness? Do they have that about them that they can go try to get the answer best they can? But then there's this tricky thing of, when do you stop spinning your wheels and raise your hand, right? But that's a key component, I think, Chris, is being resourceful.
Yeah, and I think that fits, you could also, I guess, define that as I was talking about earlier as the whole extreme ownership concept, is that whatever position you're in, your field of responsibility is everything. And so you have to be resourceful. You have to force yourself to be resourceful if you're taking the attitude that the answer is not going to come from above magically, or somebody down the chain of command. I'm not going to slough this off on them and assume they're going to take care of it. I'm going to take responsibility for everything in my field, in my area. And I think that's exactly, it's just another way of saying what you're saying in defining as resourcefulness.
Yeah, agreed. I see this as a challenge, for example, when I coach people that are transitioning from the corporate world to starting their first business, or here from the corporate world to working for a smaller organization. The thing you have to think about is, how dependent are you and how much do you need those resources that a large corporation gives you? And we don't even think about it sometimes. So to make that transition either to an entrepreneurial organization like GCI or to become your own boss, you have to be ready to not have those resources at your disposal. And it's a different way of thinking, right? It's a different way of thinking. And so you have to be much more creative and have to really try to get the answers yourself and be accountable and resourceful on your own within this smaller, more virtual organization.
Yeah, for me, yeah, it all goes to personality and your makeup. But for me, it's so much more it's so much more interesting. It's much more exciting. But when you were saying that, it made me think of some times when trying to fill a relatively high level position in the expert or senior consultant end of things, and had some very good candidates and really felt we were establishing a good relationship with somebody who could really come in and be a productive member of our team. But there have been some times when they were coming from that much bigger corporate world. And even as you said, it's not like they're stepping off the edge and starting their own business, but even making the jump for them to a more lean organization like ours, it was just too much of a a change for them to contemplate.
Exactly. Yeah. And listen, I think maybe at the end of the day, that's was for both sides' benefits that it didn't work out. And then you touched on it. What's so key is the flip side of this is the flexibility and the opportunity that presents for the right person. If you look at it from the perspective of, okay, yeah, I'm not going to have all of these resources at my disposal, but boy, am I going to have an opportunity to learn, to explore, to make decisions, to make an impact. I mean, for any of us who want this, one of the things that, having been in the corporate world, that was most frustrating to me is that on the flip side, in this large organization, I was this little cog in the wheel at best, right? But in an entrepreneurial organization like GCI, each individual can have a huge impact. And I don't know how much more rewarding that can be, right? I mean, that's what the right type of fit for GCI is looking for, is the opportunity to make a larger impact than they might have been able to make in a large organization, as far as this particular topic that we're talking about here. Does that make sense?
Yep. And I think that does then, that resourcefulness does transfer over to our relationship with our clients. When you have that culture, when you have that resourcefulness, that's just such a big part of the way we operate. That's needed and valuable when we're working with our clients, especially on these high-end expert assignments, litigation assignments, forensic investigations that may be very difficult, complex situations to determine all the problems and solutions there. That requires resourcefulness as well. So when that's part of your everyday world in everything you do, I think it makes it better for our clients in that we're not corporate drones. We just know how to connect A to B and spit out something for them.
Yeah, well said. I think that's such a huge point, Chris, is that resourcefulness and that creativity. You're never going to hear from a GCI person who's facing the customer, an expert, we don't do that, or we've never done it that way, right? You're never going to hear that. It's just not the way it operates. That's not the way we operate. And so that you're absolutely right that's the opportunity then for people who do, going back to the question you asked about what do we look for when we're looking for somebody to join the team. That's the magic part of it. And that's the opportunity. And that is, again, why GCI has done so well and how it delivers for its clients, because the approach, your approach, Paul's approach, Alfonso, is never, well, this is what we have to offer you and we're not varying from that. It's how can we help you solve your problem?
Exactly. Yeah. If anything, I think we try to figure out a way to solve any problem, to do anything, right. and sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. But
that can be a challenge. Yeah, and that comes back to the systems and the structure, and that's a lot of what EOS has done for you is properly. There has to be some guidelines, exactly, because you can't be everything to everybody as a small organization, certainly not effectively. So I think that's going back to what the systems have done for you, is giving you that structure, those quarterly cadence of having these discussions about where we go next, what type of business makes sense for us now, how do we deliver better for our clients, as a small organization, that's what the allow you to do, is that methodology to adjust on a regular basis is what that's done for you.
Yeah, very well said. Well, as I was saying to you and Janice before we started, I could talk to you about this for hours because, it's all very interesting stuff, but we should probably close on that note. And I really appreciate your time today, Henry, and all the work you do for us regularly for GCI. You want to tell any of our listeners how they could reach you at Levante and the information about your very successful podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. thehowofbusiness.com is where you'll find everything about me, as well as the podcast, which is called The How of Business.
Great. And it's a really interesting and informative podcast with lots of interesting guests that Henry has. So if any of our listeners are interested in entrepreneurial operations and growing businesses and running businesses, I highly recommend it. Also wanted to mention to our listeners that we're always looking for interesting guests on our podcast. And if you are interested or know someone who may be an interesting guest, please reach out to Janice Hoffman at GCI. You can reach her through our website, or her email address is jhoffman@gciconsultants.com. And we'd like to talk to you about being a future guest. So I want to thank Henry Lopez again for joining us today. We also invite you to take a further look at our GCI Consultant services on our website at www.gciconsultants.com, or you can reach us at phone number 877-740-9990 to discuss any of your building envelope needs. Thank you to our listeners once again, and I look forward to talking with you the next time on our Everything Building Envelope podcast.
Thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. For more information on the Everything Building Envelope, previous episodes, show notes, bonus video content, and much more, check out our website, everythingbuildingenvelope.com.